Sarah Martinez checked her watch for the third time in 5 minutes as she packed her gear into the military transport bag. The December air in Kandahar was surprisingly cold, and she could see her breath forming small clouds as she worked. After 18 months deployed as a Navy sniper, she was finally going home for Christmas. Her replacement had arrived 2 days earlier, and her commanding officer had signed off on her leave papers that morning. The base was quieter than usual, with many personnel rotating out for the holidays. Sarah had earned this break. Her record spoke for itself. Over 200 confirmed eliminations, countless missions providing overwatch for ground teams, and 0 friendly casualties under her protection. She was known among the special operations community as Guardian Angel, a nickname that made her both proud and uncomfortable. As she folded her civilian clothes, Sarah thought about her family back in Texas. Her younger brother Miguel was graduating from high school in January, and her mother had been counting down the days until Sarah's return. They hadn't seen each other in person for over a year, communicating only through video calls when the connection allowed it. Her father, a retired Marine himself, understood the demands of military service but worried constantly about his daughter in one of the most dangerous regions in the world. The mess hall was serving a special holiday dinner that evening, complete with turkey and all the traditional sides. Sarah had planned to attend, to say goodbye to her unit and the friends she'd made during her deployment. Tomorrow morning, she would catch the first transport out of Afghanistan, beginning the long journey home through multiple military bases and commercial flights. Lieutenant Commander Hayes approached her bunk area just as she was securing the last of her personal items. His expression was serious, more so than usual, and Sarah felt her stomach tighten. In her experience, officers only wore that particular look when something had gone very wrong. "Martinez," he said quietly, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "I need to speak with you privately." Sarah followed him to a small office adjacent to the communications center. Hayes closed the door and turned to face her, his weathered face showing the strain of command in a combat zone. He'd been her CO for the entire deployment, and she'd learned to read his moods and expressions like a survival manual. "We've got a situation developing," Hayes began, his voice low and controlled. SEAL Team 6 was conducting a reconnaissance mission in the Hindu Kush Mountains, about 40 kilometers northeast of here. They were supposed to check in 3 hours ago. Sarah's trained mind immediately began calculating distances, weather conditions, and potential complications. The Hindu Kush was notorious for its unpredictable terrain and hostile populations. Radio blackouts weren't uncommon in that region. But SEAL teams were disciplined about maintaining communication schedules. "Intelligence suggests they may have been compromised," Hayes continued. "Satellite imagery shows increased activity in the area, and we picked up some chatter indicating a possible ambush. The problem is, we can't get close enough with conventional aircraft due to the terrain and weather conditions." Sarah understood where this conversation was heading, but she remained silent, allowing her commanding officer to present the full situation. Her transport bag sat on her bunk just 50 meters away, packed and ready for her journey home. "We need our best long-range asset to provide overwatch for the extraction team," Hayes said, meeting her eyes directly. "The mission window is narrow, and frankly, Martinez, you're the only shooter we have with the experience and skill set for this type of operation in that terrain." The request hung in the air between them like smoke from a battlefield. Sarah thought about her family, about the Christmas dinner her mother was planning, about her brother's graduation ceremony. She thought about the SEAL team, possibly pinned down in hostile territory, counting on their training and their brothers in arms to bring them home. "Sir," she said finally, her voice steady despite the internal conflict raging in her chest. "What's the timeline for the mission?" Hayes pulled out a tactical map and spread it across the small desk. Red markers indicated the SEAL team's last known position, while blue lines showed proposed extraction routes. The terrain was brutal. Steep mountain faces, deep valleys, and very few suitable landing zones for helicopters. "The extraction team deploys at 0400 hours, he explained, pointing to various positions on the map. "Weather window is optimal for approximately 6 hours before the next storm system moves through. If we miss this opportunity, the team could be stranded for another 72 hours minimum." Sarah studied the map, her sniper's eye automatically identifying potential shooting positions, fields of fire, and escape routes. The mission would require a night insertion into enemy territory, establishment of overwatch positions in challenging terrain, and the skill to make precision shots at extreme range in potentially adverse weather conditions. "I understand if you decline, Martinez," Hayes added. "You've more than earned your leave, and this mission carries significant risks. But I had to ask." Sarah looked up from the map and met her commanding officer's eyes. In that moment, she thought about every SEAL, soldier, and Marine who had ever provided cover for her missions, who had risked their lives to ensure she could complete her objectives and return safely to base. The military operated on a foundation of mutual trust and sacrifice, and she had benefited from that covenant countless times. "Allow me," she said simply, the words carrying the weight of her decision. "Allow me to bring them home." Within 30 minutes of her decision, Sarah found herself in the armory, methodically checking and preparing her specialized equipment. Her custom M40A5 sniper rifle underwent a complete inspection, barrel cleaning, scope calibration, and ammunition selection based on the anticipated ranges and environmental conditions. Each round was hand-selected for consistency and performance, a ritual that had kept her alive through countless missions. The intelligence briefing revealed the gravity of the situation. SEAL Team 6 had been conducting surveillance on a suspected Taliban command center when their position was compromised by a local shepherd who had spotted their hide. Instead of a quiet withdrawal, the team found themselves facing a coordinated enemy response involving over 60 fighters positioned throughout the valley. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez from the communications unit provided the latest updates as Sarah prepared her gear. The SEAL team had managed to reach a defensive position on a rocky outcrop, but they were effectively surrounded. Their radio communications were intermittent due to the mountainous terrain, but the last transmission indicated they had wounded personnel and were running low on ammunition. "The extraction team consists of 2 Black Hawks and a Chinook for medical evacuation," Rodriguez explained, pointing to reconnaissance photos spread across the briefing table. "But they can't approach the landing zone while the area remains contested. The Taliban fighters are using the high ground to control all possible approach routes." Sarah studied the topographical maps with the intensity of a chess master analyzing a complex position. The enemy had chosen their ambush site well. The valley provided multiple concealed positions while limiting the SEAL's movement options. However, she identified several potential overwatch positions on the surrounding ridgelines that could provide commanding fields of fire. Captain Williams, the extraction team leader, joined the briefing as Sarah completed her equipment check. He was a seasoned special operations pilot with over 15 years of combat experience, and his reputation for bringing teams home safely was legendary throughout the special operations community. "The weather's going to be a significant factor," Williams explained, consulting meteorological reports. "We've got a narrow window before the next storm front moves through. Visibility will be limited, and wind conditions will be challenging for both aircraft operations and long-range shooting." Sarah nodded, already calculating the ballistic adjustments she would need to make for altitude, temperature, and wind speed. Shooting in the Hindu Kush Mountains was unlike anything she had experienced in training. The thin air affected bullet trajectory, and the unpredictable wind patterns created by the mountain peaks required constant adjustment and compensation. The mission plan began to take shape as the team worked through various scenarios. Sarah would be inserted by helicopter approximately 3 kilometers from the target area, allowing her to approach her chosen overwatch position under cover of darkness. Once in position, she would provide precise fire support to suppress enemy positions and create safe corridors for the extraction helicopters. "The key is timing," Williams emphasized. "We need to coordinate the suppressive fire with our approach so the enemy can't effectively engage our aircraft. Martinez, you'll have approximately 15 minutes to neutralize the highest priority targets before we begin our run." Sarah reviewed the target priority list that intelligence had compiled based on intercepted communications and observed movement patterns. The enemy had established 3 primary firing positions that commanded the potential landing zones. Each position required different tactical approaches due to varying ranges and terrain features. As the briefing concluded, Sarah found herself thinking about the SEAL team members who were counting on this mission's success. She didn't know their names or faces, but they were fellow warriors who had accepted the same risks and responsibilities that defined military service. In the Brotherhood of Special Operations, personal sacrifice for the mission and for fellow service members wasn't just expected, it was the fundamental principle that held everything together. The helicopter crew chief approached Sarah as she completed her final equipment checks. Chief Petty Officer Johnson had flown dozens of insertion missions, and his calm professionalism under pressure had saved countless lives over multiple deployments. "We'll get you as close as possible to your planned position," Johnson assured her. "But the terrain is rough, and we may need to adjust the insertion point based on enemy activity and weather conditions. Are you prepared for a potentially hot landing zone?" Sarah secured her rifle case and shouldered her pack, feeling the familiar weight of her gear settling into place. Every piece of equipment had been tested and refined through months of combat operations. Her night vision goggles, communication equipment, and survival gear could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. "Chief, I've been preparing for missions like this my entire career," she replied with quiet confidence. "Whatever adjustments we need to make, we'll adapt and overcome." The flight line was bustling with activity as ground crews prepared the helicopters for the mission. Sarah watched the methodical process of pre-flight inspections, fuel loading, and weapons checks that preceded every special operations flight. The level of professionalism and attention to detail reminded her why she had chosen to serve with these elite units. Hayes approached her one final time before departure, carrying a secure communication device that would allow her to maintain contact with both the extraction team and base command throughout the mission. "Martinez, I want you to know that this mission is entirely voluntary," he said, his voice carrying the weight of command responsibility. "If at any point you feel the risks are unacceptable, you have full authority to abort and return to base." Sarah accepted the communication device and secured it in her tactical vest. She understood that her commanding officer was providing her with an escape option, but they both knew she wouldn't use it unless circumstances became absolutely impossible. "Sir, those SEALs are going home tonight," she said with the certainty that had earned her reputation throughout the special operations community. "And tomorrow, I'll catch the next flight to Texas." The helicopter lifted off into the cold December night, its rotors cutting through the thin mountain air as Sarah settled into the cramped passenger compartment. Through her night vision goggles, the landscape below appeared as an alien world of green-tinted peaks and valleys, each shadow potentially concealing enemy fighters or friendly forces in desperate need of assistance. Chief Johnson's voice crackled through her headset as they approached the insertion point. "2 minutes out, Martinez. Weather's holding steady, but we're picking up some radio chatter that suggests increased enemy activity in the area. You sure about this landing zone?" Sarah checked her GPS coordinates one final time and confirmed her planned route to the Overwatch position. The insertion point was deliberately chosen to be far enough from the action to avoid immediate detection, but close enough to allow her to reach her firing position within the mission timeline. "Confirm, Chief. Put me down and get clear. I'll call for extraction when the mission's complete." The helicopter flared and touched down on a small plateau, surrounded by jagged rocks and sparse vegetation. Sarah moved quickly from the aircraft, her gear secured and her rifle case slung across her back. The rotor wash kicked up a cloud of dust and debris as the helicopter lifted off, disappearing into the darkness and leaving her alone in hostile territory. The silence that followed was almost overwhelming after the constant noise of the helicopter. Sarah's trained senses immediately began cataloging every sound, smell, and visual cue that might indicate danger or provide tactical information. The mountain air was crisp and clean, carrying scents of rock, dust, and sparse vegetation that were dramatically different from the desert environment around the main base. Navigation through the rocky terrain required careful attention to both her planned route and potential security threats. Sarah moved with the practiced silence of a ghost, each step calculated to avoid loose rocks or noisy terrain that might betray her presence to enemy lookouts. Her night vision equipment provided excellent visibility, but she remained constantly aware that the enemy might possess similar capabilities. The climb to her chosen Overwatch position took nearly 40 minutes, longer than planned due to the challenging terrain and the need to avoid several areas where her movement might be detected. Sarah's physical conditioning served her well as she navigated steep rock faces and narrow ledges with full combat gear and specialized equipment. As she approached the final approach to her firing position, Sarah received her first communication from the SEAL team. The transmission was weak and intermittent, but the message was clear. They were still holding their position but had sustained casualties and were running critically low on ammunition. "Guardian Angel, this is Neptune 6, the voice whispered through heavy static. "We have 2 wounded, 1 serious. Enemy activity has increased significantly in the past hour. Request immediate assistance." Sarah keyed her radio with 2 quick clicks, acknowledging the transmission without revealing her position through voice communication. The SEAL team knew that help was coming, and that knowledge might provide the psychological boost they needed to maintain their defensive position until extraction could be completed. The overwatch position she had selected during mission planning proved even better than anticipated. A natural depression in the rocky ridge provided excellent concealment while offering commanding views of the valley where the SEAL team was trapped. Sarah quickly established her hide, using her ghillie suit and natural camouflage to blend seamlessly with the surrounding terrain. Through her high-powered scope, Sarah began identifying the enemy positions that intelligence had briefed during mission preparation. The Taliban fighters had indeed chosen their ambush site well, with firing positions that controlled all the obvious approach routes for rescue helicopters. However, from her elevated position, she could see vulnerabilities in their deployment that weren't apparent from ground level. The first priority target was a machine gun position approximately 800 meters away, positioned behind a large boulder that provided excellent protection from ground-level fire, but was completely exposed to her elevated shooting position. Sarah calculated range, wind speed, and atmospheric conditions as she prepared for her first shot. Her radio crackled with an update from Captain Williams. "Guardian Angel, extraction team is 30 minutes out. We need those priority targets neutralized before we begin our approach." "How copy?" Sarah keyed her radio twice again, then settled into her shooting position. The familiar routine of target acquisition, breathing control, and trigger squeeze had been refined through thousands of practice rounds and hundreds of combat engagements. Her rifle was an extension of her will, capable of delivering precision death at extreme ranges. The first shot broke the mountain silence like thunder, the sound echoing off the rocky walls of the valley below. Through her scope, Sarah watched the enemy machine gunner collapse behind his position, his weapon falling silent permanently. The suppressor on her rifle helped mask her muzzle flash and reduce the acoustic signature, but she knew the enemy would quickly begin searching for her position. Enemy fighters immediately began shifting positions, trying to locate the source of the sniper fire while maintaining their ambush of the SEAL team. Sarah used their movement to identify additional targets, marking positions and calculating firing solutions for her next series of engagements. "Guardian Angel, that was beautiful work," came the whispered transmission from Neptune 6. "Enemy fire has decreased significantly from our eastern approach. Can you take out the mortar position on the north ridge?" Sarah shifted her aim to the mortar team that had been dropping rounds dangerously close to the SEAL team's position. The range was over 900 meters, and the wind had shifted slightly since her first shot. She made minute adjustments to her scope settings and breathing pattern as she prepared for the more challenging engagement. The second shot was followed immediately by secondary explosions, as the mortar rounds cooked off, creating a spectacular fireworks display against the dark mountain backdrop. The enemy mortar team was eliminated, and their ammunition supply created additional chaos among the surrounding Taliban fighters. Sarah's radio buzzed with an urgent transmission from Captain Williams. "Guardian Angel, we're beginning our approach run. We need suppressive fire on the remaining positions to keep their heads down during our landing." The final phase of the mission was about to begin, and Sarah prepared for the most intensive few minutes of shooting in her career. Multiple targets, shifting positions, and the pressure of knowing that several lives depended on her precision and speed were about to test every skill she had developed over years of training and combat experience. The sound of approaching helicopters grew steadily louder as Sarah shifted her focus to the remaining enemy positions scattered throughout the valley. Her scope swept methodically across the terrain, identifying muzzle flashes and movement patterns that revealed Taliban fighter locations. The extraction window was rapidly approaching, and every shot needed to count. "Guardian Angel, we have visual on your work," Captain Williams transmitted as the extraction helicopters crested the mountain ridge. "Outstanding shooting. We need you to focus on the ridge positions that can engage our approach route." Sarah had already identified 3 critical positions that posed the greatest threat to the incoming aircraft. A sniper team positioned behind a rock outcropping had been taking careful shots at the SEAL team, while 2 machine gun positions flanked potential landing zones. The complexity of engaging multiple targets in rapid succession while maintaining precision required every bit of her training and experience. Her third shot eliminated the enemy sniper, the bullet traveling over 1,000 meters through the thin mountain air before finding its target. The enemy sniper's rifle tumbled down the rocky slope as Sarah immediately shifted to the next priority target. Time was becoming critical as the helicopters entered the most dangerous phase of their approach. The Taliban fighters were adapting to the threat she posed, with several groups attempting to locate her position by tracking her muzzle flashes. Return fire began impacting the rocks around her hide, forcing Sarah to make quick adjustments to her position while maintaining her overwatch responsibilities. "Taking fire from multiple positions," she reported to Williams. "I can suppress the eastern approach, but you'll need to come in fast and low to avoid the western ridge positions." Sarah's 4th and 5th shots came in rapid succession, eliminating a machine gun team that had been repositioning to engage the helicopters. Her breathing remained controlled despite the increasing enemy fire around her position. Fragments of rock kicked up by incoming rounds peppered her ghillie suit, but her focus remained locked on her scope and the targets below. The first Black Hawk swept into the valley at maximum speed, its door gunners laying down suppressive fire as it approached the SEAL team's position. Sarah provided precision support, eliminating specific threats that the door gunners couldn't effectively engage due to their angle of approach. "Neptune 6, we're coming in hot," Williams transmitted to the SEAL team. 30 seconds to touchdown. Be ready to move." Sarah watched through her scope as the SEAL team prepared for extraction, carrying their wounded teammates toward the designated landing zone. The Taliban fighters intensified their fire, recognizing that their opportunity to prevent the rescue was rapidly diminishing. Her 6th shot took out a fighter who had been maneuvering to flank the landing zone, while her 7th eliminated a machine gunner who had repositioned to engage the helicopter during its most vulnerable moment, touchdown. The precision and speed of her shooting was creating enough confusion among the enemy forces to disrupt their coordinated response. The Black Hawk touched down in a cloud of dust and rotor wash, its crew chief helping load the wounded SEALs, while the door gunners maintained defensive fire. Sarah continued engaging targets that posed immediate threats to the aircraft, her shots methodically eliminating fighters who exposed themselves while trying to get clear shots at the helicopter. "Guardian Angel, first bird is away clean," Williams reported as the Black Hawk lifted off with half the SEAL team and the wounded personnel. "Second bird coming in for the rest of the team. Keep up the outstanding work." The second helicopter's approach was complicated by increased enemy activity as more Taliban fighters moved into the area, drawn by the sound of combat and the opportunity to engage American forces. Sarah found herself engaging targets at multiple ranges simultaneously, her rifle becoming almost an extension of her will as she adapted to the evolving tactical situation. Enemy mortar fire began falling near the SEAL team's remaining position, indicating that the Taliban forces had additional heavy weapons that hadn't been identified during the initial intelligence briefing. Sarah quickly located the new mortar position based on the trajectory of incoming rounds and the brief muzzle flash visible through her scope. Her 8th shot traveled nearly 1,200 meters before finding the enemy mortar team, eliminating the threat just as they were preparing to drop rounds directly on the landing zone. The explosion of their ammunition created a secondary blast that illuminated several previously hidden enemy positions. "Second bird is inbound," Williams transmitted as the remaining Black Hawk began its approach. "Enemy activity is increasing significantly. Can you provide cover for our extraction?" Sarah had already identified the new threats and began engaging them with systematic precision. Her 9th and 10th shots eliminated a machine gun team that had repositioned to a rocky outcropping with clear fields of fire toward the landing zone. The enemy fighters were becoming more desperate as they realized their ambush was failing. The The second Black Hawk landed successfully, and Sarah watched through her scope as the remaining SEAL team members rushed toward the aircraft. Enemy fire intensified during this critical moment, with muzzle flashes visible from positions throughout the valley as Taliban fighters made their final attempt to prevent the rescue. Sarah's 11th shot eliminated a sniper who had achieved a clear sightline on the loading aircraft, while her 12th took out a fighter who was preparing to fire a rocket-propelled grenade at the helicopter. Her shooting had reached an almost supernatural level of precision and speed. Each shot carefully calculated but executed with fluid efficiency. "All personnel aboard," Williams reported. "Second bird is away. Guardian Angel, you've done incredible work tonight. We're sending the Chinook to extract you from your position." Sarah acknowledged the transmission, while continuing to provide overwatch for the departing helicopters. Even with the SEAL team safely extracted, the enemy forces remained active and dangerous. Several fighters were already beginning to move toward her general area, having finally triangulated her approximate position based on her muzzle flashes. The successful extraction of the SEAL team represented just the first phase of the mission's completion. Sarah now faced the challenge of safely extracting from her overwatch position, while surrounded by increasingly aggressive enemy forces who were determined to prevent her escape. With the SEAL team safely extracted, Sarah faced a dramatically changed tactical situation. The enemy forces that had been focused on maintaining their ambush were now actively hunting for her position, and she could hear voices calling out in Pashto as Taliban fighters began coordinating search efforts across the mountainside. The Chinook helicopter carrying her extraction team was still 20 minutes away, and Sarah knew that remaining in her current position would likely result in her being overrun by enemy forces. Her rifle ammunition was running low after the intensive engagement, and her position had been roughly triangulated by the enemy based on her muzzle flashes during the firefight. Sarah began implementing her extraction plan, carefully packing her essential equipment while maintaining visual observation of enemy movement patterns below. Her ghillie suit and camouflage had served her well during the static phase of the mission, but movement through hostile terrain would require different tactics and equipment. Through her scope, she could see at least 15 Taliban fighters moving up the mountainside in her general direction, using tactical movement techniques that indicated they had received military training. Their search pattern was systematic and disciplined, suggesting they understood they were hunting an experienced American sniper who posed a significant threat. "Guardian Angel, this is Rescue 6, came the transmission from the Chinook pilot. "We're 15 minutes out from your position. What's your current situation?" Sarah keyed her radio quietly. "Rescue 6, Guardian Angel. Current position is compromised. Multiple enemy personnel moving to my location. I'm beginning movement to alternate extraction point Bravo." The alternate extraction point was a small clearing approximately 800 meters from her current position, accessible through a route that would keep her above and behind the approaching enemy fighters. However, reaching that location would require movement through exposed terrain, where she would be vulnerable to detection and engagement. Sarah secured her rifle and began her careful withdrawal from the overwatch position, using every available piece of cover and concealment as she moved laterally along the ridgeline. Her movement was deliberately slow and methodical, prioritizing stealth over speed as enemy fighters continued their search below her position. The rocky terrain provided excellent concealment opportunities, but it also created noise discipline challenges, as loose stones and gravel threatened to betray her movement to the searchers below. Sarah's mountain warfare training proved invaluable as she navigated the treacherous footing while maintaining tactical awareness of enemy positions. A burst of automatic weapon fire erupted from her former position as Taliban fighters discovered her abandoned hide site. The intensity of their fire indicated both frustration and determination to eliminate the sniper who had disrupted their carefully planned ambush. Sarah used the noise of their weapons to mask her continued movement toward the extraction point. "They've found my old position," she transmitted to Rescue 6. "Continuing movement to extraction point Bravo. Enemy activity is increasing significantly." The pursuit was becoming more organized as additional Taliban fighters arrived in the area, some equipped with night vision devices that posed a serious threat to her concealment efforts. Sarah could hear radio communications among the enemy forces as they expanded their search pattern and began coordinating blocking positions. Halfway to the extraction point, Sarah encountered an unexpected obstacle when she discovered a 4-man enemy patrol moving directly across her planned route. The fighters were spread out in tactical formation, each covering specific sectors as they searched for signs of her passage through the area. Sarah found herself trapped between the patrol ahead and the larger search group behind her, with limited options for avoiding contact. The extraction helicopter was now less than 10 minutes away, but she needed to clear her route to the landing zone, or risk compromising the aircraft and crew attempting to rescue her. Using her remaining rifle ammunition strategically, Sarah eliminated the lead scout with a precisely placed shot that dropped him silently behind a large boulder. The other patrol members immediately went to ground, but their reaction allowed her to identify their exact positions and plan her engagement sequence. Her second shot eliminated the patrol's radio operator before he could report contact with the American sniper, while her third shot took out the automatic rifleman who posed the greatest threat to the approaching extraction helicopter. The remaining fighter attempted to withdraw, but Sarah's final shot prevented him from reporting her location to the larger search force. With the immediate obstacle cleared, Sarah resumed movement toward the extraction point, but she could hear the larger search group responding to the sound of gunfire by accelerating their pursuit. Time was running critically short, as multiple enemy elements began converging on her general area. Guardian Angel, Rescue 6, is 2 minutes out from Extraction Point Bravo, the Chinook pilot transmitted. We can see enemy muzzle flashes throughout the area. This is going to be a hot extraction. Sarah reached the extraction point just as the Chinook appeared over the mountain ridge, its massive rotor system creating a thunderous noise that echoed through the valley. Enemy fire immediately began converging on the aircraft from multiple positions as Taliban fighters realized they had found their target. The Chinook crew chief was already preparing the extraction equipment as the aircraft flared for landing, but incoming fire was increasing in intensity and accuracy. Sarah provided covering fire with her sidearm while moving toward the aircraft, engaging enemy fighters who had achieved clear sightlines on the landing zone. Guardian Angel aboard, she reported as she reached the Chinook's ramp. The aircraft immediately lifted off, taking heavy fire from enemy positions throughout the valley. The crew chief helped her secure her equipment while the door gunners returned fire against the most threatening enemy positions. As the Chinook climbed away from the hostile territory, Sarah looked back at the mountainside where she had spent the most intense hours of her military career. The mission had been successful beyond all expectations. The SEAL team had been rescued without additional casualties, and she had eliminated significant enemy capabilities while escaping from an increasingly dangerous situation. Outstanding work tonight, Guardian Angel. Captain Williams transmitted from his position in the lead helicopter. The SEAL team sends their thanks. You gave them their lives back tonight. The flight back to base passed in relative silence as Sarah processed the events of the night. The adrenaline that had sustained her through hours of intense combat was beginning to fade, replaced by the familiar exhaustion that followed high-stress operations. Through the Chinook's windows, she could see the first hints of dawn beginning to appear over the mountain peaks. The base medical team was waiting when they landed, standard procedure after any combat operation involving potential casualties. Sarah submitted to their examination while providing initial debriefing information to intelligence officers who needed immediate tactical details about enemy capabilities and positions encountered during the mission. Lieutenant Commander Hayes was waiting for her as she completed the medical screening, his expression reflecting both relief and professional satisfaction. The mission had achieved its primary objective without friendly casualties, an outcome that validated the risk of recalling his best sniper from well-earned leave. Martinez, I just got off the radio with SEAL Team 6, Hayes said as they walked toward the debriefing facility. They wanted me to convey their personal thanks for what you did tonight. According to their team leader, your shooting saved at least 3 lives and made their extraction possible. Sarah nodded acknowledgement but remained focused on the technical aspects of the mission that would need to be documented for future operations. Her shot log showed 12 confirmed eliminations at ranges from 800 to 1200 meters. Under challenging environmental conditions that had required constant adjustment for wind, elevation, and target movement. The formal debriefing session lasted nearly 2 hours, as Sarah provided detailed information about enemy tactics, equipment, and positioning that intelligence analysts would use to update their assessment of Taliban capabilities in the region. Her observations about enemy night vision equipment and communication procedures were particularly valuable for planning future operations. As the debriefing concluded, Sarah realized that her original departure time had passed several hours earlier. The commercial flight she had been scheduled to catch was already somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, carrying other military personnel home for the holidays without her aboard. Hayes had anticipated this issue and had already contacted the transportation office to arrange alternative travel arrangements. "There's another flight departing tomorrow evening," he explained. "It will get you home with just a one-day delay. I know it's not ideal, but under the circumstances, I think your family will understand." Sarah thought about calling her family to explain the delay, but the time difference and communication security requirements made that impractical. Instead, she composed a brief message that would be transmitted through official channels, letting them know she was safe and would be home soon. The mess hall was serving breakfast when Sarah finally made it there, still wearing her combat gear and carrying her rifle case. The few personnel present at the early hour recognized her from her reputation around the base, but no one approached her directly. Military culture respected the need for quiet reflection after intense combat operations. She sat alone with her coffee and a plate of eggs, watching the sunrise through the mess hall windows, and thinking about the events that had transformed her planned departure into an extended combat mission. The SEAL team members she had helped rescue were names on a mission report, not faces or personalities, but she knew they would return to their own families because of the decisions made in the previous 24 hours. Chief Petty Officer Johnson found her in the mess hall as she finished breakfast, carrying a package that had arrived through official mail channels. The return address indicated it was from her family in Texas, probably containing Christmas presents or photographs that her mother had sent to brighten her deployment. "Martinez, this came in on yesterday's mail run," Johnson said, setting the package on her table. "Also, the SEAL team wanted me to give you this." He handed her a small military coin bearing the SEAL Trident insignia, a traditional token of respect and gratitude within the special operations community. The coin represented recognition from fellow warriors who understood the significance of what she had accomplished during the rescue mission. Sarah examined the coin briefly before securing it in her pocket, a tangible reminder of the night's events that she would carry with her long after the mission details faded from immediate memory. The weight and feel of the metal seemed disproportionate to its size, much like the impact of individual actions during critical moments in military operations. "Tell them I was honored to help," she said to Johnson, who nodded and departed to continue his duties around the base. Sarah opened the package from her family, finding Christmas cookies her mother had baked, photographs from her brother's recent school events, and a letter from her father expressing pride in her service and anticipation for her return home. The normalcy of family concerns and holiday preparations seemed almost surreal after the intensity of combat operations just hours earlier. As she prepared to return to her quarters for some rest before the next day's departure, Sarah reflected on the simple phrase that had set everything in motion. "Allow me" had been her response to a request for help, but it had represented something much deeper about military service and the bonds that connected warriors across different units and specialties. The decision to delay her leave had cost her precious time with family during the holidays, but it had preserved the opportunity for other service members to have their own reunions and celebrations. In the complex calculus of military service, such trade-offs were both inevitable and meaningful, representing the values that defined the profession of arms. Tomorrow evening, Sarah would finally board her flight home, carrying with her the satisfaction of a mission successfully completed, and the knowledge that her skills and dedication had made a difference when it mattered most. The SEAL team members were already on their way to their own holiday destinations, alive and whole because someone had been willing to say, "Allow me."